Hey guys, in my previous videos I shared with you some tips on how to encourage foraging behavior in your birds. And I was so surprised but also happy to hear that this has worked so well for so many people. I mean, I received messages and comments on how it's helped some people to reduce screaming in the birds, while in other people it's just helped them to simply have their birds become more interested in a toy that they haven't been interested in before. I decided to create this video to share with you some more tips on how I use foraging to do two things with Smokey. One is to keep her relatively quiet during most parts of the day, but also to keep her really mentally stimulated, and that's so important when keeping a parrot. If you're a new bird owner, foraging behavior is something that's so important, and in my opinion it's one of the things that you should really focus on when getting a new bird. And I know that a lot of people with new birds tend to ask, how do I train my new bird to how to do a cool trick, for example. But in my opinion, trick training can always be delayed. An old parrot can always learn a new trick. But problem behaviors are something that you want to prevent right from the start. So the earlier you start with preventing these behaviors, the more time you get later on to focus on training and not to troubleshoot problems after they happen. Now, if you guys think about it, birds in the wild spend the majority of their times looking and foraging for food. Now, in captivity, when we feed our birds food in a bowl, what takes them hours to do in the wild is now reduced down to a couple minutes, and in some cases just seconds in captivity. What the bird has in his hands is a bunch of time, and he doesn't know how to occupy that time. And the mistake that a lot of people make is they think, well, I'll just buy my bird a bunch of different toys so my bird can keep themselves occupied. But if you think about it, even if you have a kid and you keep the kid inside, let's say a room with a bunch of toys, eventually that kid, no matter how many toys and how exciting the toys are, they'll become bored of that toy. And that's when problem behaviors start arising. Now, if you think about it, the funny thing is this. When a bird runs out of things to do, he actually starts resorting to normal behaviors, but these behaviors that would have been normal in the wild now become really problematic in captivity. I'm going to give you some examples. For a bird who spends most of his time just sitting there thinking, what should I do? His first instinct would be, I'll start preening my feathers. So what is normal preening soon becomes feather plucking. And what was usually normal vocalization becomes screaming and excessive screaming. So as parrot owners, what we want to do is we want to figure out how do we keep our birds occupied for most of their time. And it all boils down to foraging. And this is why I emphasize for new parrot owners, this is so important to begin with a bird early on in its life. The point of foraging is you want the bird to learn how to occupy their time. And for some people who ask, well, why can't I just offer a bunch of toys? The point is, once your bird plays with the toys several times, it'll become bored. So the way that we motivate our birds in trying to get engaged with their toys is we hide food in them. And that gives them a purpose for playing with their toys, and it keeps both their beaks and their minds busy. So what I do with Smokey is I create for her, and in my last video you guys saw that I drilled holes in her wooden block toys. For many of you, you probably realize by now that parrot toys are really expensive to buy. So what I actually do is I buy just a bunch of wooden blocks or 2x4s at my local hardware store. Now it's important though that if you guys are going to buy your own wood, just make sure the wood is parrot safe and it's not treated with any chemicals. But anyways, once you get the wood, from there it's actually quite simple. All I do is I drill a bunch of holes inside the wooden toys and I stuff seeds inside. Now it's really important that you guys make the holes so small that the seeds barely fit. In other words, it should be kind of hard for you to put the seeds in, but also practically impossible for you, the human, to get the seeds out. Now the birds, however, have a really strong beak, so what they got to do is they actually got to use their beaks to try to get these seeds out. So the bird actually encounters several problems. One, sometimes the seeds will be so difficult that they have to chew through the wood to get the seeds out. This keeps their beak really well trimmed. So the need to bring your bird in for a beak trimming is completely eliminated. Second, because they're constantly working to get the seeds out, they are physically always going to be working, so they become physically tired afterwards. As you can imagine, this drains a lot of their brain power as well. So after foraging, your bird becomes both mentally and physically exhausted. So what do humans do when they're physically and mentally exhausted? Now, I don't know what you guys do, but after I'm mentally and physically drained, I just want to take a nap. And that's exactly what the birds will do. So what you see here is, if the bird is busy foraging for their own food, and afterwards, if they're taking a nap, they rarely have time to resort to screaming or feather plucking. Now, the second and the most important tip I want to give you is this. With Smokey, I actually make a variety of foraging toys for her. I make about 7 toys, one for every single day of the week. And I identify when is my bird more likely to scream. For most birds, they're most vocal early on when the sun first rises, and later on before the sun sets. That's when most birds are most vocal. So my tip would be, that's the time when you need to put your foraging toys in your bird's cage. Put it in right before you know your bird's going to scream, so that they become busy, and afterwards they just fall asleep, and for the rest of the day they're quiet.